esta sexta plataforma regional para la reducción del riesgo de desastres de las Américas. En este momento vamos a ver una de las últimas intervenciones que se han hecho en transcurso de las mesas de trabajo de estos 3 días. Corresponde a reducir el riesgo de tsunamis, reducir las pérdidas económicas del sector turístico, recomendaciones de los organismos internacionales de seguridad para asumir estos temas de importancia para toda la comunidad. Bienvenidos.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Brigitte Leonie. I'm working for the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction in Geneva, and I'm also managing the whole campaign on the World Tsunami Awareness Day. I'm very pleased to be here with you for this very important session. And before actually introducing my 3 panelists, people who will be here with us today for the conversation, I just would like to remember you what is the World Tsunami Awareness Day. As you may know, on the 5th November has been designated by the UN Assembly General as the World Tsunami Awareness Day. This year, we're going to celebrate for the 3rd time the World Tsunami Day. The theme this year is aligned to the International Disaster Day, which is actually focusing on target C of the Sendai framework, which is reducing cost of any disasters. And because here we're talking about the tsunami, we're going to actually focus on reducing tsunami cost. So in the world, as last year, we're going to organize many events to raise awareness about, tsunami risk. Those events will be taken, globally, and the first one is actually happening today at the Regional Platform of America. And also, we're going to do a special activities in the region. And for that, I'm going to call Luisa Pareja from the Panama office, who will actually brief you on the many activities that will be happening here. And those activities will start actually today, because you'll be involved and you'll be invited to participate in it at the end of the session. So, Luisa, the floor is yours.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. Last year, we started out this campaign called the Youth Wave of Awareness about Tsunamis, and we wanted to invite you all to prepare, because at the end, we will take a group picture so that we can all become part of the campaign. So we'll have the picture taken, we have some slips of paper, and we're going to have the hashtag WTAD and the country you guys are from. I thank you greatly, and I will be handing out these sheets of paper with markers. Thank you.
So the session today, as I said before, will be focusing on the economic cost of tsunami, and in particular on what can be done to reduce tsunami costs in the tourism sector, which is a sector that is most affected by tsunami. So I've got 3 panelists with me today. First, Madame Bernardita Paul from the Chilean government. Good afternoon, Madam. She belongs to the National Manager of Reconstruction and Risk Management of Disasters of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development in Chile. Chile, a country that has been really affected by many tsunamis, the Dominican Republic. Pedro is the Regional Director of the Civil Defense in the Dominican Republic for the Osama region. So maybe later you will explain, where is Osama region. And is the main coordinator of the Prevention, Mitigation and Response Program in Santo Domingo Este. And Madame Amanda Charles from the Caribbean Tourism Organization. Amanda Charles is a sustainable tourism specialist at the Caribbean Tourism Organization and heads the Sustainable Tourism Product Development Division. Correct? Do you want to add something? Maybe I missed something in the short presentation? No, you okay? Fine. So for the next 40 minutes, we will listen to our 3 panelists who will share with us, how their country and the tourism sector has been affected by past tsunamis and what they are doing to mitigate tsunami risk and reduce tsunami economic costs in the future. We will then take questions from the floor, and we will conclude. So, just a little bit. I need the other presentation. Okay, tsunamis are, as you know, very rare events, fortunately, but they do happen. And they are also the most devastating events and the one that actually kills more people. They are also the one that cause the heaviest economic losses. Just to give you an idea, I'm going to give you some figures of past tsunamis. For example, the Indian Ocean tsunami, which affected 14 countries. Actually, the estimated cost for that was $15 billion, and is probably underestimated. In 2010 in Chile, the earthquake and tsunami cost an estimated $30 billion. And the last one that you've probably heard of, the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami that struck in 2011 cost $360 billion. So tsunami have immediate impacts on lives, but also have long-term economic impacts on infrastructure, on agriculture, and also the tourism sector. But here we are in the Caribbean, so are we at risk? And it's something that we're going to watch now. I mean, I invite you to watch a video that will tell you, how much we are at risk, and also if we are protected by any early warning system. So let's watch the video. It's quite a long video, 7 minutes, but I think it was interesting to show that to you because it will give you an overview of what we can expect, in the Caribbean region and in the Americas as well. Thank you.
The Caribbean has a long history of tsunamis that have affected its shores. During the last 500 years, almost 100 tsunamis have struck our shores. Since 1842, more than 3,500 people have lost their lives to this threat. Tsunamis are not as frequent as hurricanes, but given their rapid onset and the destructive power of the waves, the risk to life is much greater. On January 12, 2010, the magnitude 7.0 earthquake in Haiti caused the death of over 200,000 people. It also generated a tsunami that produced a run-up of 3 meters in Haiti. At least 7 people lost their lives to this tsunami. Other areas that have been impacted by tsunamis over the years include Jamaica, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Eastern Caribbean, Venezuela, Panama, and Nicaragua. Since the last major tsunami in 1946 that caused over 1,800 deaths in the Dominican Republic, there has been an explosive population growth across the Caribbean from residents and tourists along the coast. If we just take into consideration the number of people that can be on the beach on any given day, up to 50,000 residents and tourists are exposed daily to these killer waves. Despite the real threat in many places, it is still considered el peligro olvidado, the forgotten danger. To address the urgent need to get prepared, government officials, scientists, educators, emergency people, and first responders in the region have been working together to establish the Caribbean Tsunami Early Warning System.
Por años, los tsunamis habían sido considerados.
For years, tsunamis have been considered the long-forgotten danger of our region, simply because of the fact that they don't occur that often. But we are now very aware of the great danger that they represent.
Además de las millones de personas.
In addition to the millions of people that live in the coastal zones which could be affected by tsunamis, the Caribbean receives millions of visitors every year who also enjoy its coastlines, which could be impacted by this event at any time. Because of this, it is very important that everyone be prepared. In the Caribbean, we realize that tsunamis do not recognize political boundaries, and because of that, the different countries in the region have been working together for over 10 years to establish a tsunami early warning system.
Tsunamis are a natural phenomena that occur in our oceans. Nobody can prevent them from happening. They can be generated by a number of mechanisms such as earthquakes, coastal and submarine landslides, or underwater and above water volcanic eruptions, even meteor impacts.
The biggest tsunamis are usually caused by the occurrence of an earthquake under the sea. The earthquake must have certain characteristics. It must have a component of vertical motion and so push a column of water so that the wave is generated. So you have your large earthquake and you have your wave, the water column moves, the wave splits in two, half goes towards the nearest shore and the other half goes out into the open ocean.
The majority of the tsunamis that affect the Caribbean are produced by local earthquakes and could reach the shores in a matter of minutes. Tsunamis travel at speeds of up to 500 miles per hour in the open ocean. In shallow waters, the wave height grows. The 2010 tsunami in Chile and the 2011 tsunami in Japan demonstrate how destructive and severe such locally generated events are and how far-reaching the consequences can be. If you feel strong shaking, or if you are near the coast and you see the water withdraw significantly, exposing reefs, rocks, and fish, or if you hear a strange roar from the ocean, it is important to evacuate the hazard zones and go to high ground immediately. The tsunami has arrived.
We want the public to understand in a very critical way the importance of being able to be responsive without any activation or notification. If you have an earthquake and the ground is shaking, then we know that we have to get away from the coast. And therefore, we always say, when the sea goes out, we go up.
We can also have what we call a tele tsunami, which is when an earthquake occurs out of the Caribbean area. It could occur as far away as Portugal or the Canary Islands, and then if a tsunami is generated, it will take, let's say, 4 or 5 hours, depending on the distance again. And so we have a little more time to warn people. But if it occurs closer to the islands, in some cases we will have less than half an hour to warn the people.
In case of a tele-tsunami, you would not be able to feel the earthquake, but the authorities will give the population instructions on what to do and where to go. There would be plenty of time to respond. A tsunami can happen at any time, day or night, and is not just one wave. The first wave is not necessarily or usually the biggest wave. It can take just minutes or hours before the subsequent waves come on shore. The waters will not necessarily draw down before the coast is flooded by a tsunami. Instead, the effect will be similar to that of a very fast tide. Extremely strong currents can be generated in bays and harbors, putting life and property at great risk. The force of the water rushing down streets can be as great as winds of a hurricane category 5.
You're not being impacted by just water, which is bad enough. Water is 1 gallon of water weighs 10 pounds. So you're not just being impacted by water, you're impacted by water plus sediment. It's like being impacted by wet concrete. And therefore, this is not something that normal human beings, even abnormally strong, robust human beings, can withstand. So it is strongly advised that you seek to get out of the way of the tsunami wave.
A tsunami early warning system consists of 4 components: tsunami hazard, risk and vulnerability assessments, tsunami monitoring and detection, and warning guidance, warning, dissemination, and communications, and preparedness, readiness, and resilience. Although the Caribbean Tsunami Warning System was established in 2006, there are still gaps and the system needs to be strengthened. Each country in the Caribbean has been implementing steps and procedures to meet the necessary standards and has also been contributing to the system.
Okay, thank you. So we are at risk, even from Portugal. That's what the video was saying. We have some kind of early warning system in place, but obviously preparedness is the best prevention measure. So I'm pleased now to welcome Madame Bernardita Paul from Chile. As I said before, I mean, Chile has had many tsunami. The big one was in 1960, I think, and the last one was in 2011, even 2010. Exactly. So I think we are going to, I would invite you to come to the podium, and you're going to tell us how Chile has managed to actually implement some measures to reduce the impact of tsunamis. Yes.
Okay, we're going to start with a video clip. An earthquake and a tsunami, and then the wave grew. A tsunami came, and then it dismantled houses, and then it destroyed houses as well. Chile is a country of catastrophes. 4 tsunamis in 10 years. %75% of communities affected. More than 500 deaths. Chile is a country of catastrophes. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Bernardita. I have a couple of tasks. I'm going to tell you quick. I'm in charge of reconstruction for the housing department in Chile, and I'm also a councilwoman from Puente Alto, the highest commune in Chile, from 2012. And in 2016, I obtained the highest number of votes. I don't want to highlight my accomplishments, but I want to highlight the kind of accomplishments that young people can accomplish to try and have an impact in the world. I also want to greet all of the Chileans who are here with us. I'm going to be presenting a lot of topics, but they represent all of the institutions that have been present in these achievements. First off, I'd like to ask if anyone has had to flee a tsunami. Please raise your hand. No one? Okay, there is one. Okay, so when it comes to the Q&A, I would like for you to participate because I believe that's impactful. I haven't had the chance to flee a tsunami, but I'd like to tell you a story of Jorge, who's the person being indicated by a circle. I met him a while ago, and he told me his story. He told me that despite the fact that the alarm reached his cell phone, which is a pretty good system we have in Chile, which comes through all telephones, it vibrates, it rings, he actually decided to stay home, pulling stuff out. The wave came, thank goodness he survived. He hung on to a palm tree, one of the trees in the background of the picture. He was still processing the shock. He fortunately survived. And as strong as the tsunami was in the north of Chile, there weren't many casualties because people prepared. I adore my family, so I want to show you a picture of them. I'll be back to them. I want to highlight their smiles because I'm going to talk a lot of positive things. We've also made mistakes as a country, obviously. Today I'm going to talk about good things and ideas, and I recommend that you hear me out because most of the countries here are going to be welcome to our country to be able to copy and duplicate the kind of tools that we have, which after 2010 are truly fantastic. Chile, in addition to our wine, we became famous for all of our catastrophes. I sleep very little. I'm in charge of earthquakes, fires, tsunamis, volcano eruptions, landslides. 50% of our communes have been affected, but in some of these catastrophes we've invested billions. We've had to rebuild over 260 communities, obviously hotels and tourist infrastructure, many initiatives. We've had to revisit our regulating plans. It's been titanic work, but we've advanced and we've learned. Very swiftly, I'm going to tell you about tsunamis. In the past few years, we've had 4 of those, no less, being the main one back in February 2010. That was an earthquake and tsunami, which marked a difference. That was a milestone in the history of Chile, which has to do with that tsunami and earthquake. We had over 500 deaths. For us, it was truly horrible. They were very tragic stories, and that's why since that time we started technologies and protocols which are as strong as possible to be able to prevent all the catastrophes which came to us. I'm going to address three topics. First off, how we are preventing tsunamis, how we're getting ready, and lastly, we're going to delve into a topic of tourism, how the tourist industry is addressing tsunamis. Okay, this is a buoy so that you can look at it. It costs a fortune, but it saves lives. I want to tell you that we have a national seaquake alert system. Through this system, which is important for Chile, we've invested a lot into stuff that, as I said, you will be invited to our country so you can replicate whatever you believe is interesting. Satellite phones, 24/7 assistance. We have 24 stations all along the coastline, which are always vigilant. The input is issued by the buoys 200 miles from 200 miles offshore. So we have time to analyze the alert, let people know, and just run away. The CPAC of focalized alerts is something we've advanced as well, because the warning was basically global. People had to run inland from the shore, and that affected tourism and also jobs. The tsunami was basically focused up north, but people down south would also run. So it was a negative influence for our GDP and our job market. So now we have this system that focuses on that targets alerts. There are a lot of participating institutions from minute 5. Once the event happens at minute 0, then minute 5, minute 10, the whole picture is clear. I can send you a PowerPoint, every single participating institution. What I was telling you, the whole message, telephone text message happens at minute 5. So from minute 5, as soon as we get the alert, we have enough time to just start running. Because literally, that's what we have to do. We just have to take mom, dad, kids, and we just gotta run uphill.
Here we have it. With regard to prevention, I think it's unfortunate, and this is why we have a big challenge from the Ministry of Housing, because we as the ministry were reacting to the catastrophes. There have been so many that we've had. We're just now beginning to plan and invest in mitigation work. We react, we build contention walls, new roads, parks, but we haven't been planning sufficiently. And now that we are in peace times, which is what I call it, we're trying to foresee and working on convincing the politicians of the importance of investing. Politicians frequently think that it's impossible to make an investment in mitigation profitable, but I think they are very wrong. If you maintain contact with the neighbors and participate in meetings and explain what the investment being made is about, I think this can afterward generate votes. This is not the reason of existence of politicians. Unfortunately, we need it to govern. But the truth is that I think that there is this opportunity to explain to them that mitigation policies can be profitable and can bring with them political wins. Regarding the Ministry of Housing, I would like to briefly discuss two experiences. The first is in Coquimbo, where this man Jorge lives. We have had to adapt. In this sector, there were only houses. Right now, I'm taking people out of there. I have not yet finished. It's been a complex task. People don't want to get out. They're very used to living there, and it's been hard work. What are we going to build there? What I'm most interested in mentioning is this building. The coastal edge has the privilege of looking out to the sea, so we want to take advantage of it. But with these buildings, that the first floors only have services, say commercial stores, etc., so that if the wave arrives, those who live there live on the 3rd floor and up. What has also been greatly discussed is the participation of the private sector. These projects are part of a public tender, and here my clients from the Ministry of Housing, which is what I call them, they'll be on the bottom floors, and upwards they will be able to sell to whoever they want. Class B families, so there's something really nice and important for our country, which has to do with social integration, so as to not have the vulnerable population over here, middle class over there, and the wealthy over here. Instead, we're all together and we take advantage of the view in this privileged sector of Coquimbo. Of course, there are exit routes, green areas, etc., so we need to be prepared for next time. We also have a project here that, additional to mitigating a future tsunami, this is a park that in the future doesn't block the tsunami, but the water enters, but with less energy. So in the year 2010, the water entered quickly and people couldn't escape, and that's why there are 500 people who passed away. On the contrary, now it enters, but slower, and this is a lagoon that is prepared to be filled with water. This is great too, because the concept we use in Chile is rebuild better, build back better. So seeing opportunities in catastrophes. This kind of a park, of course, is going to improve the quality of life of those who live around there, and it's also promotes tourism because you can turn the sector into something that's much more attractive. Additionally, there's also the technical and legal side of things that have been modified in order to be able to demand the hotels and buildings and everything that is built along the coast, so that it will avoid the potential for future collapses. We have reached the municipalities. I am fan number 1 of the local government, and this is why I think it's very important to guide municipalities so as to how to obtain financing, because in Chile the municipalities have this budget and the government of Chile has that budget. So that's why municipalities need to request funding in order to be able to finance these evacuation routes. And I insist on the possibility of politically make profitable these evacuation routes. With regard to tourism, for us as Chileans, tourism is key. It represents 11% of our national income, the GDP. It is one of the most sustainable industries. Here we have some images to make fun of the Argentines, because 26%, it has increased 26% in recent years because the Argentines cross the border and come to buy to our country. They have higher taxes when it comes to IT and TVs and such. So they have these purchasing tours, and they come over, and that has been very good for us. You know that Argentina and I are friends, and Chile are friends and rivals, so every time we have an opportunity to poke fun at them, we make sure to not miss it. This is an initiative that I believe is notable. That was done for the Ministry of Tourism with the Investigation Police. We have a representative present, so I'd like to greet her. And this is something I find extraordinary. As foreigners reach our country, where we register that they arrived, in other words, we're in Puerto Varas. It is a touristic location in the south of Chile. There's a group from Germany, and they're registered in the hotel. How do we do this? Through credit cards. We don't need to ask them so many questions, but that through the credit card we know where they're coming from. So if this group of Germans later on went to the north of Chile, we know that they're there. What good is it to have all of our tourists geo-referenced so that if there is a catastrophe, we can let the countries know and let them know where to come and get us, because Chile is a country with 4,300 kilometers long. So if the authority of Germany goes to Puerto Varas and the others are in San Pedro de Atacama, clearly they will not find them. This has been one of the great achievements made. It's a platform that isn't mandatory as of today, but we hope to change the law for this to be mandatory. And this is going to foster tourism. Tourists and foreigners are frequently afraid of coming to Chile because they see on TV that it's always the worst. They want to drink some wine, but they're also fearful. So through this platform, we promote tourism. Here I return to my family. Well, I have 9 siblings whom I love dearly. We've been working as a country. Before we had tourism, you would go and everything was very informal. And in recent years, the Ministry of Tourism has become very strict, and they've created prevention plans and an emergency response plan. This picture was taken over the summer. We had a brief talk initially. We sat down in the barges, and there was all kind of drama that told us what could happen and what couldn't. My father fell off of one of these barges, and we were doing rafting, right? And of course, my dad is the heaviest of the entire group, but we were able to rescue him after he fell off the raft. And although we laughed a lot about it at home, the truth is that he could have passed away. So the Ministry of Tourism has also focused on prevention and reaction, how to react to things that could happen. I would like to close by saying I'm going to be the future Minister of Housing of Chile. I don't want the current minister to hear me because I could be left unemployed. I would like to thank the platform because I leave here with very clear ideas that truly have been stored in my heart. First of all, to not build or rebuild vulnerability, and the next important thing is how resilient people with different capacities have. I don't use the word disability. I call it different capabilities. Planning and collaboration is key. Regions need to be like spiders. Prepare them so that if the web falls, that they can quickly rebuild it and build a web that is every day stronger. The importance of private sector participation. I want to commit that during my management this happens, and work with citizens in a collective way. Someone said not individually, whether it's a mother's group or older person's group, to be able to work with them collectively. And the last is that public entity needs to have to do with the pertinence of the place. Sometimes people come from Harvard, Stanford with all kinds of theories, but where true public policies are born successfully is from the territory. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bernadita, and we support your electoral program.
Now, I'm pleased to actually invite Mr. Pedro Reynado Santana Martelo, who is coming from a small city in Dominican Republic, Santo Domingo Este. It's a city of, 1 million inhabitants, more or less? Yes, okay. So I think it's very important that you come to the podium as well and you tell us what do you do in your city to be more tsunami or less tsunami vulnerable. Okay?
Bien, buenas tardes. Saludo especial desde la República.
Special greetings from the Dominican Republic to all the participants of this 6th regional platform for the disaster risk reduction. I will try to follow through on the time that is running. Well, when hearing from Chile's experience, in the case of tsunamis in the Dominican Republic, even though every year we have a cyclone season from the 1st of June to the 30th of November, up until now, we had not had this constance. But this phenomenon that was mentioned in the previous video, in August 1946, which we call the tidal wave, that had an effect on Matarena Sanchez province in the northern region of our country, where we had waves that were up to 5 meters high and a very high death toll. So in this regard, there is no culture, generally speaking, like the culture we have surrounding the issue of hurricanes. As a result of Hurricane George from the year 1998, which was devastating for our country, 1 week later there was a false alarm at about 3 a.m. where they were saying that from this region there had been a tsunami or a tidal wave, and people left their houses very fearful. And later on, this information was, the authorities said it was a false alarm. When entering our dear municipality, Santo Domingo Este, which is in the province of Santo Domingo, its population is approximately 948,000 inhabitants and about 123 square kilometers. As you can see, we have a large part of our municipality. We have the Caribbean Sea. And something we have to mention here is that the various hydrographic basins that we have, one of the most important ones, which is the Osama River, has permanent contact with Santo Domingo Este. Just as the seismic failures that we have there are a point worth noting, because what we have seen previously, we've seen it be mentioned that these are fundamental elements for the occurrence of a phenomena. The Osama River, with an important water flow for the region, it would be vital, or it would be a fundamental component for the water of a tsunami be able to penetrate no more than 2 hours according to estimates. But the penetration from the point of the river to Osama would only take 6 minutes. This is why this is also a very important matter. Here you can see an image of the Great Santo Domingo. That involves the National District, the capital city, Santo Domingo, east and north. You can see how the river goes down in these territories. In the case of tourism, we as the main economy of the Dominican Republic have, at a national level, identified this sector. There are work agreements in those provinces that are of the greatest population capacity. In the case of Santo Domingo Este, that is only now coming of age, it's a young municipality that recently creates its municipal committee for the prevention mitigation of risk of disasters. We have identified this process where we have several tasks pending. The case of an occurrence of a tsunami, we have at least 10 hotels that could be affected, as well as various historic monuments in our municipality, which are frequently visited by tourists of the entire world. These could also be affected, and these have already been duly identified. We have been working since the year 2002 with the creation of the Law on Risk Management of the Dominican Republic. It is a very modern law that has all of the features and opportunities to be able to carry out the various plans. We also have the methodological guidelines at a national level for drafting the various contingency plans, emergency plans, risk management plans, as well as those issued by the Center for Emergency Operations. This is a national entity. We have the contingency plan for earthquakes, as well as the plan for standard procedures at a national level for the case of tsunamis. It's important to note that the Dominican Republic is represented by the National Office of Meteorology as a focal point for tsunami warnings. Currently, as was mentioned in the previous video, in the year 2008, the process of installation began of different measures throughout the country. Of those that we have in the Caribbean, there are currently 4 that are strategically located. And one tide gauge is located in Santo Domingo, which is an important point. We also have a protocol for the correct management of communications, as was mentioned earlier. And we have a system for communications with the 3 most important phone operators in the country in order to allow citizens to have information in real time with the guidance that is maintained, that has not only a tsunami time, but that every day the assistance mechanisms know how to deal with this kind of prevention. Currently, and thanks to the campaign of resilient cities of the UN, we have implemented the municipal plan for the reduction of disaster risk reduction of the municipality of Santo Domingo Este. In this plan, we can find fast estimates of risk that were evaluated and conducted together with communities in the affected areas. And although it's true that here we can speak of tremors, landslides, and hurricanes, we also have tsunamis present in these statistics. As an unlikely event, but in the case that it were to occur, it would be that of greatest intensity for our country. In this same plan, as a way to ensure its compliance of the objectives that we identified, we have the creation of the Municipal Office for Managing Risk and establishing the contingency plans for each of the phenomena that were identified. in this municipal plan. Our city has very teams. We're interested in working with people, and we're going to work, and on the next platform we will present tangible results. This is the case with including the tourism sector within the Committee for Prevention and Mitigation, conducting training programs for tsunami matters in all communities that are affected, the evaluation of the facilities and identifying the routes, the main routes, and alternate routes in the case of tsunamis, and establishing a system or improving the system for early warning.
Para el sector turístico la estimación de la posible pérdida en caso de la ocurrencia de un tsunami.
The occurrence of a tsunami, we would like to thank you for hearing our presentation.
Okay, thank you very much for this excellent presentation. So now I'm going to invite our third panelist, Amanda Charles from the Caribbean Tourism Organization, and she will explain to us, how all the members of the association now are aware of the tsunami risk and what the private sector is also doing, to reduce the impact of disasters, especially the one in the future. Thank you.
Muy buenas tardes. In English, ahora. So this afternoon, I'm very pleased to represent the Caribbean Tourism Organization and provide an overview of what we're doing at the regional level, various countries, from a regional perspective to mitigate the economic losses as a result that may occur as a result of tsunamis. Preparedness is important for us in the Americas, not just countries like Chile that are regularly affected, but all countries, and that really is the principal message that I want to leave with you this afternoon. So I will present a brief introduction to the CTO, the Caribbean Tourism Organization. I will provide initiatives that are ongoing and some national level initiatives as well, and I will culminate with some insights in terms of challenges and needs. So the Caribbean Tourism Organization, established in 1989, is an intergovernmental organization that fosters the development and promotion of tourism in the Caribbean. There are currently 24 member countries, as well as various private sector partners, airlines, cruise lines, hotels, etc. The main areas of focus for the CTO is sustainable tourism development, and the core of my presentation really will focus our work related to promoting the development of sustainable tourism in the region. I wanted to highlight here just a brief map of the Caribbean. When I speak of the Caribbean, it is the wider Caribbean basin, but of course not all countries are members of the CTO. It is a member organization, but our countries speak English, French, Spanish, and Dutch, which really represents the diversity of the wider Caribbean region. As it relates to the contribution of tourism specifically, many of you would have heard that the Caribbean, like most of our countries, is heavily dependent on tourism. It is the #1 economic sector, representing at least 80% of GDP, gross domestic product, in some countries. It drives entrepreneurship, certainly employment. There is an estimated 1 million persons directly employed in tourism, and in some countries it's actually half of the labor force. For those of you who may have visited the Caribbean, it is comprised of small island developing states. There are small territories as well as small populations, and not having the competitive advantage to compete in manufacturing and other industries, tourism really is an opportunity for social and economic development. You may have heard in the video at the beginning the number of tsunamis that have impacted the region. Approximately 11 to date have impacted the region, including the significant events in the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. Again, it is not as frequent as hurricanes, which we have to battle with every year. And you will see that one of our challenges is the lack of prioritization, really, when it comes to tsunami preparedness. And this map just highlights the timeline in terms of impact and locations. So I move now to regional initiatives to foster tsunami preparedness in the region. I want to highlight three main initiatives. The Caribbean Tsunami Information Center, which is based in Barbados, and really works closely with UNESCO to foster tsunami preparedness on a regional basis. I will highlight some of their initiatives subsequently. Based in San Juan, Puerto Rico, is the Caribbean Tsunami Warning Program, supported by the U.S., and they also generate a lot of information and tools. And the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, which is CDEMA, also hosts a readiness campaign, and that is called the Caribbean Tsunami Smart Campaign. And on the next page, you will see some of the initiatives that have occurred. I want you to also note that this initiative was implemented from 2007 to 2010, which is over 8 years ago. And that was the most significant intervention in terms of a Caribbean regional approach. And certainly it is timely that we continue tsunami readiness preparation. What has been developed? Model standard operating procedures for countries, parameters for getting tsunami-ready designations. Currently, 3 countries in the English-speaking Caribbean have been designated tsunami-ready. And in each country, there is a tsunami focal point, and a number of training workshops have been held. That is supported, of course, by the UNESCO Caribbean Tsunami Ready Recognition Program. And I will subsequently talk about one of the main issues, which is the annual tsunami exercise, which is hosted by UNESCO Caribbean Initiative and supported by the various regional organizations that support disaster preparedness. So as it relates to Carib Wave, since 2011, this annual tsunami exercise has been hosted. It's hosted in March of every year. And the objective really is for countries and emergency management stakeholders to test their tsunami warning and evacuation procedures. And I have here just some highlights in terms of, you know, getting the community mobilized, various stakeholders are engaged, including the tourism sector, and as well as the community closer to the coast that would be most directly impacted if there should be a tsunami incident. In terms of country initiatives, I want to highlight briefly and highlight only 2 major efforts by the Caribbean Tourism Organization, the CTO, in terms of delivering tools and products to our member countries, the focus of which really has been on policy. And in 2008, we developed our Caribbean Sustainable Tourism Policy Framework, and that provides guidelines for countries to develop their own plans and policies. Of course, tsunami is highlighted, not in depth, and we will have an opportunity to expand the scope of the information, but certainly it is considered as a major hazard. Similarly, we have a disaster management manual, also published in 2008, and that includes some guidelines and protocols that countries can use to enhance their resiliency for all types of disasters, including tsunamis. The most important initiative currently being implemented is the Supporting a Climate Smart and Sustainable Caribbean Tourism Industry Project. And that is part of the Natural Disaster Risk Management program in the CARIFORUM countries, which is being implemented, funded by the Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, European Union, Caribbean Development Bank. And in this regard, we are working directly with the Caribbean Development Bank to implement this project. And one of the main highlights is to update our sustainable tourism policy framework, as well as the disaster risk management manual. So in terms of the tsunami-ready countries, I just want to highlight quickly the main ones that have been designated tsunami-ready. So Anguilla was the first country in 2011. What is interesting is the incorporation of both the public, well, it's driven by the public sector, and it engages the private sector, particularly the tourism sector, tourism being the main industry on Anguilla. The British Virgin Islands was the second country to attain its designation in 2004. The difference is it's a 4-island nation state, and all the countries have the disaster evacuation maps for tsunamis, signage posted throughout the countries, annual drills, and different programs. St. Kitts and Nevis, 2 years ago, obtained their designation. And what is interesting is they've identified higher ground assembly points. And as part of the annual drills, they have clearly identified evacuation maps, evacuation procedures, and also engaged the tourism sector to be part of the drills, as well as schools that would be closest to the coastlines and then would be impacted. Lastly, the Puerto Rico experience. Puerto Rico has a very robust tourism-ready program, tsunami-ready program. And they've generated a lot of education and tools materials, education, training, and tools. And Puerto Rico is the only country that has actually developed a tsunami safety card for tourists. And I highlight that on the next page. It's the one closest to the right. And it's accessible online, and it's also distributed to all the hotels. Information is provided at the airports as well, and it really is a regional best practice. So lastly, I want to highlight the challenges and as well as the needs. And in terms of challenges, as I mentioned previously, tsunamis really are not given the attention and prioritization, I think, for the Americas, but more so the Caribbean region. And particularly at the tourism, the level of the tourism sector, what we have seen in some countries is resistance because, of course, the sector wants to mitigate potential impact and not scare visitors away. Certainly, there's an over-reliance on the public sector to drive initiatives, and more could be done to engage the private sector and the community. More needs to be done as well in terms of sensitization and awareness. Highlighting needs. I mentioned before sensitization and awareness of the community and all sectors, including the tourism sector. And certainly, UNESCO has developed a guide for tsunamis for hotels and visitors, and I think it would be very valuable to be supported to implement and foster the adoption of that book by the tourism sector practitioners. And I leave you with a photo. It's a typical photo of a Caribbean country, and you can see that it is low-lying, very vulnerable, and exposed. It's beautiful, it's paradise, but that can change in an instant, as we saw, in Chile, in the Indian Ocean. And at any time, there will be a number of locals enjoying the beaches, a lot of visitors. There may be cruise ships, there may be ports. There will be bars and restaurants closest to the coast. There will be high-end properties, hotel investments. And so it is critically important for the Caribbean and really the wider Americas to pay more attention to tsunami awareness and readiness. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much for this excellent presentation. I think it gave us a lot of, experiences from different countries, and I think there are so many things already in place. But as you said, awareness, can you maintain the awareness? How can you raise awareness? That's an issue. So what I would like to do now is to open the floor to you. Here we have a microphone. So if you have maybe one or two questions, we would like to, I'm sure the panelists will be very happy to answer the questions, right? Maybe just quick questions, because we don't have a lot of time, but if you could just introduce yourself very quickly as well. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Voy a intentar ser lo más breve.
Thank you. I'm going to try to be as brief as possible, but Bernardita also asked me to share my experience. Okay, it is not very spectacular as you may think, but it's important to take into account that since we are constantly living with the threat, in my particular case, I live on the coastline, and back in 2015, a tsunami occurred, which generated about waves of about 4 meters high. What I want to highlight is that education and going door to door and train people about tsunamis is what is going to save lives. So since I live on the coastline, since I am savvy about the topic, I was able to do an evacuation without any national qualified organization giving me any kind of alert. So the importance of education on the level of schools, universities, and technical organizations that may convey the message door to door, we're going to have people saved. We won't be able to have any human casualties. Now, I have a question for the representative from the Dominican Republic. Okay, with regards to a vertical evacuation, and let me explain. Okay, when a tsunami event happens, is there the possibility of doing an evacuation to save areas considering a quota of 30 meters, or can you do a vertical evacuation in case that I'm not close to that safe point previously established? In Chile, there are some problems in terms of legal regulations for the use of private property. Therefore, I don't know how you guys are doing in your countries with regards to the legal regulations to be able to carry out some kind of an evaluation in this concern, because we also need to look at other perspectives. If there is presence of hotels, for instance, in flood areas, you may participate by supporting with vertical evaluation with the people who are farthest from those previously established muster points. As you mentioned, we have regulations issued by the Ministry of Public Works and Communication, which regulate the construction of all types of public or private structures. Also, from the municipal mayor's office, they look at this process. So what happens with Santo Domingo Este? We don't have any vertical elevations, but maybe you were able to look at the map. We have some safe areas which are natural. In those points with very wide, well-known roads, citizens can actually reach safe areas in a timely manner. But the topic of regulation, actually in Santo Domingo, a permit was approved for the construction of levels in some points up to 50 stories, 50 floors, but we still don't have a hotel infrastructure in Santo Domingo higher than 5 stories or 5 floors.
What you said is so true. Education, 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 I think is the base of everything, right? Another question?
Sí.
Yes.
Buen día. Mi nombre es Alton Andrade.
Good day. I come from Ecuador. Okay, a question for Chile and the Dominican Republic. I wanted to know although I've already heard this before, there is a probability that we may build structures which may be vertical in your countries in case that a horizontal evacuation cannot be done and the muster points are too far away. And on the other hand, have you considered the creation of domes to be able to generate speed dissipators for tsunami waves? An example is what happened in Japan. There were some domes to try to reduce the velocity of tsunamis, and that may also facilitate vertical evacuation. Okay, I'm participating in an initiative that doesn't have to do with tsunamis, but something that has to do with volcano eruptions. We're thinking about Chaiten, where a volcano erupted 10 years ago. People don't want to live there, and we're free humans, and we cannot force people to relocate. If the volcano erupts, it'll be a disaster, but people don't want to leave the area. So we're doing a master plan that will include places that are as high as possible and centers where they can escape and live about 3 days with food, some technological infrastructure. They can live there because if the emergency comes, institutions will not be able to address the situation right away. My country is a country of risks from north to south, and our task at the end of the day is to create conditions so that we can safely evacuate and so that we can reach the technical level in order to mitigate disasters, deaths, and also material losses. Okay, in the case of the Dominican Republic, the natural structures are only 1 kilometer away from the coastline, which is what we call the safe zone. But in some disaster management plans, we've identified the threats, and now there is political willingness, which in our case is the most important thing. Sometimes what we require is for municipal government willingness in terms of carrying out some work. So our authorities have the best willingness to comply with all of the measures that may be necessary so that if an event should occur, the Dominican Republic will not have a single death.
I simply wanted to add that it's really a different perspective for the Caribbean islands because essentially the areas of most of the islands are so small that there is a possibility that the entire island, the entire country would be covered by the wave. I do think the ideas of dome is excellent, and I think it's really an opportunity for self cooperation so that countries like Chile and other countries that are more advanced have been impacted, and including other countries like Japan can help, to transfer the best practices. As a region, we really are reactive, and I think my panelists from Chile alluded to that. And it's only when something happens that we try to mitigate and recover. And preparedness and planning prior is really important and key to save lives and mitigate loss, which is, again, the theme for this year's World Tsunami Awareness Day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. We can take more questions. So who wants to ask a question? No? No question at all. Maybe maybe a question I'd like to ask you. I mean, do you think it's the role of the private sector or the public sector to actually better prepare people against tsunami?
Bueno, yo creo que la responsabilidad final es del...
I believe the final responsibility lies with the government. That doesn't exclude making the private sector responsible as well. Right now there is a topic on our desk which is social corporate responsibility, and I believe that at least in Chile right now we're having people build We're having companies build schools and parks and so forth, and I insist on the need, on the potential of convincing the private industry that their inputs and contributions are appreciated by the community. Everybody wants to live a nice life, and as a country, we have to bring the private companies on board. A few years ago, there was a fire because lots of big companies made donations. Some of them rebuilt the fire station. Everybody pitched in, and I've been thinking, because it is a challenge that I want to take back home, since we are in times of peace. We need to convince the companies that they can have a positive influence, so that during times of catastrophe they can have the possibility and the incentive to be able to contribute with resources, people, and whatnot. So we need to convince them that they have to contribute. And companies, they want to have a nice image, but they also need to try and help the country mitigate and avoid any damage generated by different catastrophes, in our special case, tsunamis. Okay, I also believe that 10 years back we would see all of the responsibility from the government sector. Right now, disaster risk reduction is a world topic. They are topics that matter to everyone, and the government has the responsibility to guide and work on prevention. But in terms of mitigation, in terms of responses, we have to be integrated: central government, local government, commercial, tourist sector, communities, all of the trade associations, because at the end of the day, what we want is to save lives, and we've been changing this. I heard that we are reactive countries. Yes, we're always prepared to react, but we've changed that mentality of being reactive, and we're becoming more preventive. We need to work on prevention. In the case of the Dominican Republic, the Education Ministry is working on an official curriculum for primary and secondary education with regards to disaster management, because we understand that this is a topic that affects everyone.
Really briefly, yo pienso que no puedo. You know, from the Caribbean perspective, really the state, the public sector drives hazards mitigation. And it's really multi-hazard, looking at all types of disasters, including tsunamis. Certainly the state has a role in providing plans, policies, and facilitating training, enhancing, of course, education and awareness of the entire community. But the public sector also has a responsibility, and I do believe they have resources and should be more engaged in hazards, preparation, mitigation, and management as it relates to tsunamis. And certainly, I think for us, we are mobilizing the tourism sector to play a more active role in disaster management based on the impacts, certainly, of potential disasters to tourism losses. And I'll give you a quick example. With the impact of the hurricanes of 2017, if you don't know the diversity of the Caribbean, it's 7,000 small islands, right, and islets. And of those 7,000, perhaps about 7 or 8 were significantly impacted by the hurricanes. And you had persons in Trinidad being told, I'm so sorry, your island was devastated. Because the concept, of course, is, you know, that the Caribbean is really so small that one island is impacted and all are impacted. And we experience significant cancellations in bookings by visitors. This year, we've seen a reduction, particularly during this time in the traditional hurricane season. So education and awareness at the global level is important, and that is where the private sector can play a role, because when visitors come to our shores, the private sector really are the ones who generate the most in terms of income and employment.
Yeah. Okay. It's just here the beginning of the conversation, because I think we could talk a lot about that, you know. But I mean, I think at the end everybody should be a risk reducer, and maybe when we choose a hotel, you know, also we want the hotel by the sea, and you know, it's always our perception of risk as well. So, but I mean, now we're nearly going to conclude, but I mean, I would like to know if there's one thing that maybe the audience should take with them, you know, back home. What would you say to them? Maybe each of the speaker. So your last word.
Bien. A mí me gustaría invitar a todos los países.
I would like to invite all countries that are at risk to strengthen technologies and protocols, both to protect their citizens and their tourists. Also invest in alarm systems, evacuation routes, and constructions that are prepared for receiving tourists. Looking at catastrophes, there is always an opportunity to rebuild better. And I'm not going to repeat what I said before. Let's not build vulnerabilities. Let's rebuild social integration, and that's a country that's very interesting for tourists. I'm going to leave you with my email, and I will be willing to talk to you if you want to. Okay, I'm going to summarize. Okay, we need to develop empathy in terms of disaster risk reduction. Not because I live in an area where I'm not going to be impacted, that doesn't imply that I should not prepare. Because if I'm not affected, I may help someone or a community in a specific area, but in doing that, for doing that, I should have the knowledge, and I should be totally aware of the.
Gracias.
Sorry.
And I really like the term that you use, that we should all be a risk reducer. And I really want to leave with all of you that tourists are people, and at any moment when a disaster strikes, there may be visitors in your countries. Remember that they don't know their neighbor, they can't go to their aunt or uncle or sister, so they are also very fragile and vulnerable. When communication systems fail, their family members millions of miles away will be wondering about their safety. So as we as countries think about our disaster management plans and protocols, let us ensure that we cater for visitors to our shores. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we've got a last question. Yes, maybe we take that before we leave.
Sí. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es trabajo en la oficina de gestión de riesgos.
Good afternoon, Jose Galvis from the Barranquilla Disaster Management Office. Okay, what are the monitoring programs that you have seen or that you propose due to undersea landslides? Okay, in the case of the Dominican Republic, as I was saying, the National Meteorological Office is the focal point for alert. And there is a whole installed system at sea. I mentioned 16 tide gauges. 4 of those are at the Dominican Republic. That monitoring department works 24/7. And it's always monitoring the occurrence of any event. And if something should occur, we adopt any of the plans provided for each case and for each particular area.
You want to add something?
Okay, quickly, I want to say again, the buoys that we have, 5 buoys, 200 miles from into the sea, which communicate to our 42 stations, which at the end of the day generate the alarms. And over time, we have been developing alarms that are that focus all along the nation, so that we don't evacuate the whole coast, but only evacuate the sector that may be exposed to a tsunami alert. Okay, can you clarify? Do you have a monitoring system or early alert system for tsunamis that are produced by submarine landslides? Submarine landslides. Do you have any monitoring for those kinds of occurrences? I'm not talking an earthquake or seaquake, but a submarine landslide. I'm not an expert. I'm not a tsunami expert. I do post-tsunami reconstruction. Can you explain to us what you're talking about, what these kinds of tsunamis are? Okay, tsunamis happen for two reasons. One, when there is an earthquake, which epicenter is the sea, and it is easy to detect. But when there is a submarine, a huge landslide, millions of cubic meters, it is very difficult for us to know where the event is happening unless you have monitored that. That's the question I'm asking, because if you know where the geological fault is, and if there is a huge undersea landslide and you monitor that, you may determine that a tsunami is going to happen. Otherwise, it's very difficult. Let me explain. About a year ago in Santa Marta and in most of the Riohacha coast, we had a micro tsunami which was apparently generated due to a submarine landslide, because there was no earthquake that very day, no earthquake at all. Nothing came up. Nobody noticed, nobody realized that there was a micro tsunami. They realized when the ocean actually reached the road.
So your question from the audience, and very quickly, because you know we have to go to the other for the closing ceremony. So we need to wrap up now.
Bueno,
Okay, the only verified case of a huge tsunami was in the earthquake in Alaska in 1964, the biggest one in the U.S. A landslide happens, and there was a lighthouse that was destroyed, and then there was a controversy about Papua New Guinea. In the south of California, the ocean is very deep, and there is a threat of landslide there. And there was a controversy in Papua New Guinea because there was a very small earthquake below the limit that we know, and a tsunami was generated 7 meters high, killed more than 2,000 people on a strip between the ocean and a lake. And okay, we verified that, and there is a very important parameter. On the coast of Japan, the waves were very high when bathymetry was done close to the shore. That was the problem of the base in Chile, for instance. Okay, to summarize, we made a calculation. We determined that the distance of 100 meters through bathymetry, we just verify at 10 meters. On the other hand, I want to congratulate you because you're so concerned about the tourism in the Caribbean. There is Telly Smith, who's a student who months before in the UK, in her geography course, she was told, when you look at the horizon and when you see a wave that is too high, that is called a tsunami. So she saved her parents and more than 100 tourists. However, 2,000 Danish citizens died because they had no idea what a tsunami was. So training and what you guys are doing in the Caribbean, which is a region that I like very much, I congratulate you.
Okay, so I think it's time to wrap up and to thank all our panelists. I think a big applause to them because they've been really excellent. Thank you very much for your presentation. I hope you're going to celebrate or commemorate the World Tsunami Awareness Day on the 5th of November with many, many activities. And now I'm going to call Louisa again for remember what we said at the beginning, I don't know where I put my paper, but with the hashtag. So if we could just take a picture of all of you, I think as a remembrance of the day, that would be really nice. And thank you very much, and have a safe journey back home if you're leaving soon. Okay? Thank you.
Buenas, sí, acá estoy. Aquí Carolina nos va a tomar la foto. Les agradezco a los de este lado que nos integremos a este pedacito más cercano. Y voy a llevar esto.
Planificación y seguir las recomendaciones de los organismos de socorro y de seguridad serán básicos para evitar contingencias mayores. Estos son los mensajes que nos quedan del desarrollo de las mesas de trabajo acá en el Centro de Convenciones Cartagena de Indias. Los invitamos a seguir más adelante con más información y con la clausura de este importante evento.